Hello, you're right. My name is George, I'm from Hong Kong and I'm an Oxford student. First of all, a belated Merry Christmas, and I hope everyone is safe and sound during COVID times. It's term break, so I went to Scotland for a 5-day trip in mid-December. I was a bit scared that I might get the virus or the trip might not go smoothly, but I'm glad none of that happened. In this video, I'll share with you about my trip. I had booked a hostel in Edinburgh, where my flatmate was also going. We took the train from Oxford to Edinburgh together, and it turned out to be a dizzy and long ride with 2 changes. For those of you who adore Harry Potter, you would love this decorative display of platform 9 3/4 in the intermediate stop, London. During the ride from London to Edinburgh, while I read my lecture notes and did 2 crossword puzzles, I also saw how the green pastures were bathed in sunshine, as well as how the river near Newcastle train station reflected the clouds and buildings perfectly, producing this stunning scenery with a beautiful blend of colours and lights. We got off the train in Edinburgh to experience a temperature weirdly similar to Oxford. I walked up the stairs and went to my hostel to check in and settle down a bit, before joining my flatmate and her boyfriend, who drove us to a Chinese restaurant for dinner. On the way there, we saw a weird, is it a tricycle? That looked quite funny. Over dinner, which was great by the way, my flatmate's boyfriend taught me how to use the gimbal/stabilizer, but unfortunately I didn't learn it very well and probably still need more training, so forgive me for all the shaky footage. We then proceeded towards the Christmas market near Princess Street Gardens. We could already see the spectacular view of it from afar. The big wheel and the lights from the buildings stood out at night time. We only window shopped a bit, catching glimpses of the necklaces, rings, hats, small wooden decorations, and many other souvenirs that were on sale. We didn't experience the rides, but I offered to take a picture of my flatmate and her boyfriend in front of the merry-go-round before bidding them goodbye, as they would go to Glasgow at night. Yes, I am an excellent third wheel, thank you very much. I took a good look at the Scott Monument and the surrounding scenery before heading back to the hostel alone. I also made sure to appreciate different angles of the market and the incredible architecture along the way. Alright, back to the hostel. It's funny looking at this rubbish bin because it would tell you that Justin Bieber was apparently not very popular here. As I walked up the staircase, I saw night figures standing confidently at the corners. There were also artistic objects on the walls everywhere, creating a lively ambience. The hostel went to great lengths to remind us about personal hygiene during COVID times, using words and phrases that were quite funny, weren't they? Most rooms were associated with the title to give you a unique sense of belonging. Next to my bed, there was some simple lighting and 2 plug sockets. My room consisted of bunk beds for 4 people in total. I was looking forward to my Glasgow day trip the next day and had a good night's rest. On day 2, I woke up to a nice view before enjoying breakfast in the hostel. It was still early when I reached Edinburgh Waverley train station, so I detoured a bit in Edinburgh and took a few pictures of the architecture under daylight. No worries, I'll spam you with this kind of snapshots throughout the video. Oh, I should tell you about the little hiccup in my train journey to Glasgow. It was only at the gate that I realised I booked the wrong date for the train. At last, I had to cancel the original booking with only a partial refund, and I needed to buy a new ticket. That slightly ruined my mood, but to be fair, it was my own mistake. Anyway, I alighted at Glasgow Queen Street Station to meet my flatmate again. We first did our typical window shopping in Buchanan Street. We almost had a procedure. She would recommend some outfits for me, I would try them on, I would usually feel quite satisfied, I would look at the price tags, and then I would put them down and just go. There were quite a few interesting street performances happening here and there, but I was particularly impressed by this mate who leapt through rings of blades and fire. Soon, we reached St. Enoch Square, where I would return at night to visit the Christmas market. For now, we went on roaming the streets. My flatmate said Glasgow's roads were usually structured perpendicularly and that the city was a relatively industrialised place. I told her I agreed after wandering around for a while. For example, factories and chimneys were seen everywhere. She also said that murals were common on buildings and walls in Glasgow. Apparently that's true, and they seemed to reflect the artistic and cultural side of the city. We also walked past a building belonging to the University of Strathclyde, and it's interestingly called the Place for Useful Learning, as if there would be a place for useless learning. It didn't take long before we arrived at a Cha Chan Teng, which I love as a Hong Konger. For those of you who don't know, Cha Chan Teng is a type of restaurant originating in Hong Kong, serving local-style cuisine at generally more affordable prices and in more casual settings. It seemed like ages since I last saw a Cha Chan Teng menu or ate that style of food. We had a nice lunch and said goodbye, as we would probably see each other again only after term starts in mid-January. Then I visited Glasgow Cathedral, which brags about church-style structures and architecture, as well as collections of post-war stained glass windows. I visited the tomb of Christian missionary Saint Mungo, founder of Glasgow City. For history lovers here, the cathedral also commemorates many other famous people, so you would surely not be bored. Outside the cathedral, I saw the sculpture of James Lumsden, who was Lord Provost of Glasgow from 1843 to 1846. Since I had scheduled to meet my friend from high school at 3 p.m. somewhere pretty far away, my cultural visit was followed by some walking and a railway journey. While walking towards the High Street rail station, I discovered a supermarket whose Chinese name roughly translated to a supermarket for top students. What a nice gimmick to attract local students. I think I overlooked and strolled past the High Street rail station, but as a bonus, I saw the Merchant City Clock Tower. I finally found my way back to the station and took the rail to Charing Cross. I originally thought this was the Glasgow subway system, but it was just the rail. In fact, not many cities in Britain have a metro/underground system. London has the tube, while Glasgow has the subway. Later that day, I tried out the actual subway, which I'll show you in a minute. I walked quite some distance from the Charing Cross station to where I would meet my friend. It's a restaurant called Ox and Finch, offering contemporary tapas-style dishes. We ordered some nice food, chatted a bit, and enjoyed the relaxing vibes. After our stomachs felt satisfied, we walked towards the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum nearby, passing by an ice rink on the way. I somehow felt like every piece of castle-like architecture in Scotland would start looking pretty spooky from the outside as soon as the sky got dark. Inside, though, the gallery/museum had multifarious exhibits, including animals, painting, artistic designs, historical artifacts, and much more. We didn't spend too long in this place as we planned to visit the Glasgow Botanic Gardens as well. However, it turned out that the Botanic Gardens was closed, so we could just take a peek from the outside. My friend ended up bringing me to the main building of the University of Glasgow. We toured around the campus, both outside and inside, and took a few videos and photos. I guess the daytime view would be pretty different from the nighttime view, but at least I defo enjoyed the latter. After leaving the main building, we walked towards Hillhead Station to take the real subway. On the way, we had a detour into Ashton Lane, which is known for its bars and restaurants, and saw the beautiful Christmas decorations there. We are now finally in the subway. The train segments were surprisingly very short and the ceiling was low, matching what my flatmate had previously mentioned. The subway system also had very few stations, with inner and outer circles running in opposite directions. We got off at St. Enoch Station, window shopped in the shopping centre there, and briefly pushed past the crowds in the Christmas market to go somewhere else, as we were not too hungry yet. We reached Glasgow Green at the end of the day. It was quite large and supposedly, well, green, of course. The air was fresh and our walk was nice, under the company of soft lighting. We encountered the Nelson Monument, erected to the memory of Admiral Lord Nelson, and saw how it pierced the clouds. Soon, we left from the McLennan Arch entrance and lingered in the streets instead, seeing the High Court nearby. When walking along the river, we thought about dinner alternatives apart from the St. Enoch Christmas market, but anyway, we did eat in the market finally. I tried this thing called the chicken basques, excuse my terrible pronunciation. There were also churros in this Christmas market, but we planned to walk to George Square to enjoy it in the Christmas market there. Alas, it was actually cancelled, so we missed out on our churros. Anyway, it was still an amazing day in Glasgow, and I couldn't stop thanking my friend for being an excellent tour guide while we were wandering around before returning to the Glasgow Queen Street train station. I said goodbye to him and took the train back to Edinburgh to get some well-earned rest in the hostel before visiting the Highlands the next day. It's now day 3, the beginning of travelling without friends. I had booked a day tour around the Highlands for this day. From the coach, we could see large pastures and farmlands with comparatively tiny animals. The coach pulled up outside Trossach's woolen mill, where I could have bought clothes, bags, caps, scarves, books, postcards, and many other souvenirs you can possibly think of. I didn't buy any of those except a cup of iced caramel latte. Yes, I am a coffee person. I had a glimpse of some mountains afar and a small river nearby, taking some nice pictures of them before getting back on the coach. While it was great to have sunlight, the views became more spectacular as clouds, fog and mist entered into the equation. The lochs and rivers looked exceptionally alluring, while the big and tall mountains were partially covered at the top. By the way, the tour guide Alan said loch is a Scottish Gaelic word, meaning a lake or a sea inlet. We then briefly stopped in front of the Three Sisters of Glencoe for some photo taking. It was simply astounding when 3 enormous mountains registered right in front of your very eyes, making you feel like an elf. Back on the coach, I saw more lochs and rivers. The water was almost like a mirror, clearly reflecting the scenery above. Later during the day, we would have a boat cruise across the very famous Loch Ness, which I eagerly anticipated, of course. We stopped somewhere near Fort William for lunch. I needed something refreshing after the dizzy ride over bumpy, bendy roads, so I ordered a lemon cake and orange juice. I also had a cheeseburger with some chips to energize myself for the afternoon. In the afternoon, we would visit Urquhart Castle before the Loch Ness cruise. The castle came with a souvenir shop, again selling the typical things you would see, so I'll say no more about it. I'd like to draw your attention to the interesting exhibits related to the medieval fortress though. They would tell you about people's posts and roles, so you would, for example, learn about what the chaplain, the steward, and the marshal were. There was also a model of the castle here, before we actually stepped into the real thing. When walking towards the main parts of the Urquhart Castle, I saw the trebuchet confidently standing on its own. It's a giant catapult that could launch stone balls over a long distance. I walked further down the path to visit various spots within the castle and take in the breathtaking scenery of Loch Ness. While you're enjoying the view, I'd just like to spend some time thanking Alan for delivering all the cultural and historical information all day, while driving the coach at the same time. He was really passionate about introducing Scottish history and everything about the Highlands, sharing with us incessantly the stories behind the kilt, the names of the surrounding places, or the meanings of the most important Gaelic words. Apart from the word loch, he also taught us that Inver, found in Inverness, means an estuary, or the mouth of a river. I felt a bit guilty for sleeping through a lot of that content. I'm probably not a very cultural person and could only catch keywords such as trench warfare, the divine rights of king, Roman invasion, Jacobites, Scottish independence, etc. Alan also played some Scottish Gaelic music on the coach, allowing us to immerse ourselves in the culture. What followed was obviously the very enjoyable boat cruise. Smooth curly waves gently brushed past the water's surface, while the gigantic mountains rested on the sides and protected the waters. The last bits of sunlight softly emerged from the sky. Their entry was not glamorous, not dazzling, it was soothing and calming. You would be irresistibly connected to nature, but also voluntarily in a sense. Although we did enjoy a few moments of peace and quiet, we had hardly seen enough of the scenery when the boat arrived at the shore. I discovered a sculpture of whom I believe was Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. Legend has it that it inhabits Loch Ness. I did some usual window shopping in the souvenir shop before returning to the coach to get back to Edinburgh. I had ice cream at Scotch Corner when the coach pulled up in Pitlochry midway. It's probably not a very good idea given the freezing weather, but unfortunately, not many food stores were open then. Hello again, Edinburgh. It was already 8ish at night and I was knackered, but I didn't want to waste any time, so I went on exploring around town. I walked along Victoria Street, which was beautifully decorated. Many small shops there had closed already, but I peeked at their interiors to see the special things they had. I went further up to Victoria Terrace to get a top view of the street. When I was lingering in the streets, as I usually did throughout the trip, I discovered this impressive display of lights in front of me. I looked up where I was and knew then that it was Edinburgh Castle. I bought a last-minute ticket for the Castle of Light and went straight into the castle. That's a lot of castle visiting for a day indeed, but let's see how different the experience would be at nighttime. The atmosphere was pretty mysterious and spooky when I was moving along the pretty dark paths. There were some animations playing on the walls, and some were actually quite hilarious in my opinion. They certainly made the castle visit more interesting than it would have been. I also saw a lot of weapons in the castle. After all, this place was historically a military base to defend against enemies. I took a few pictures and videos in different parts of the castle, while not forgetting to enjoy the nighttime view of Edinburgh city. Although the castle was not that big after all, there was not little to see, and it's definitely a beautiful place to visit at night with the lighting effects. It brags about a completely different style from the Urquhart Castle at daytime. Luckily, I went there 2 days before it was announced to be closed due to a virus outbreak among the staff members. After leaving Edinburgh Castle, I walked past Camera Obscura and World of Illusions, which I wasn't particularly keen to visit, but it did seem like a popular place for tourists. I walked along a few more streets to feel the energy of the city at night. I wished I could have a bite, but the Christmas market had already been closed when I arrived. My phone battery also almost dropped to zero, so I just returned to my hostel for a good night's sleep. It's now the 4th day. My first stop would be the National Museum of Scotland, but during the walk from my hostel to the museum, I was captivated by the National Library of Scotland. I went in to take a look, walking up the stairs to the upper floor, where the staff told me that the library was meant for registered readers' use only, so I decided to just leave. This morning, the sky was pretty clear, making the architecture around me look gorgeous. It didn't take long to arrive at the National Museum of Scotland, which was enormous. I think I stayed there for 1.5 to 2 hours, but I probably visited 1/3 of everything there only. There was just too much to see because it vertically spanned from the -1st floor to the 7th floor. The exhibitions were of a wide variety. Here are a few shots related to innovation and science, encompassing the fields of physics, chemistry, biology, and many more. There were also models of bikes, cars, planes, and different modes of transport. They looked really cool. And there were also interesting items related to geology, if you're interested in that. There was a model of Holyrood Park, which I would visit in the afternoon. Some other displays were related to music, such as different types of instruments. And of course, the animal lovers among you would find much biodiversity in the museum. Let me give you a few seconds to peep at the lovely animals. I went to the terrace to catch a nice view of the surrounding area before leaving the museum. It's probably time to get some lunch, but again, I took random photos and videos of street views en route. They deserved to be appreciated because the daytime scenery of Edinburgh was new for me. After all, I went to Glasgow and the Highlands the 2 days before. Anyway, I slowly drifted towards the Scottish Storytelling Centre. Why would I go there? Well, because I wanted to try haggis, the national dish of Scotland, at the haggis box there. And I had to have coffee, so there we go. The server asked me how the food was. I said, truthfully, that it was divine. She was really happy and went like, whoa, that's a big word. I had an enjoyable chat with her for a while before paying and proceeding to my next stop, Holyrood Park. Before reaching there, I took a few snapshots again, obviously, and had a detour in the Canongate Kirkyard. Many highly respected people were buried in the cemetery, including the famous economist Adam Smith. I walked around for a while, realizing that no one else was visiting this place. Scared of being alone in a cemetery, I quickly wrapped up my visit and headed towards the park. The Holyrood Park brags about the renowned Arthur's Seat, which is an ancient volcano situated at its highest peak. My main goal was to hike all the way up to that point. So, let me pan my phone around a bit to show you roughly where I started. I would start by walking along this path, and I'll show you some intermediate shots during my hike. This is a stupid shot to prove that I was indeed here. Some paths were a little muddy, so my boots definitely helped a bit. Note that some parts were pretty steep too, so if you really plan to hike here, do watch out. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but here we are at the top. The view was absolutely breathtaking. I briefly felt lonely at that moment because no one was celebrating it with me. Having said that, I still enjoyed the perks of traveling solo. For example, I could have a more flexible schedule and I could freely decide wherever I wanted to go on the spot. I looked down a bit and realized the path was pretty steep. It was quite windy as well up there, so I was particularly careful when filming footage and walking around. The journey downhill along the slopes was pretty challenging, but the scenery was my best compensation. Honestly, I'm terrible at photography, but if you're at Holyrood Park on a sunny day, you don't have to be good at photography at all. Any randomly taken picture or video would simply be great. The view was just too captivating to look bad on your phone or camera. Having completed the downhill journey, I went over to the Palace of Holyrood House nearby, where the Queen stays every year during the Royal Week. This magnificent palace was the official residence of the British monarch in Scotland. I was given a digital device as the guide. It had animations with audio narration to explain the architecture, history, functions, etc. behind each component of the palace. Here we go from the entrance, after which we would immediately see the quadrangle. I think the digital guide indicated a total of around 20 stops inside, if my memory serves me right. Here are a few examples: the Royal Dining Room, the Great Gallery, and the Holyrood Abbey. I'm not that much of a cultured historian, so I did not grasp much of the history behind the palace. I just appreciated the paintings and patterns on the walls and the ceilings, alongside the other intricate decorations in the various rooms. But if you love British or Scottish history, or if you're into everything about the royal family, I think this is absolutely the place to go, and you'll love the stories told in the audio guide. Outside the palace, there was the garden, where I strolled around to enjoy some fresh air and the amazing view at dusk. Since my battery dropped to almost zero again, I decided to call it a day and return to my hostel to work on something academic. On the way though, I encountered some interesting street views and performances. A particularly impressive one was the spray painting show. When I was watching it, a horde of people passed by and sang Christmas songs aloud. To be frank, it was pretty funny watching them sing as a crowd in the streets. Overall, the city of Edinburgh felt like a really artistic place. Soon, I returned to the lounge in the hostel to recharge my phone battery and myself. I also worked on some slides for a group presentation on a financial statistics paper. The feeling of working while traveling was in fact quite satisfying. Once I got peckish again, I walked down the stairs to Grassmarket to supposedly try some pub food, but a series of pubs had to be closed due to a power outage. I ended up eating a chicken burrito with barley beer, and the Mexican meal was simply delicious. That pretty much concluded the day. After checking out and leaving the hostel, I realized the final day of my trip was pretty misty. While I was looking for a cafe to enjoy some brunch, I saw some premises of the University of Edinburgh. I finally landed at procrastination, which Urban Dictionary interpreted as the tendency to not start anything until you have had a cup of coffee. Oh no, this is so me. I ordered a ciabatta with a latte, and I wrote a postcard for my family in Hong Kong while enjoying the meal. Following brunch, I proceeded to Calton Hill for a short hike. I captured the very structured arrangements of the buildings midway. It's like a trend here in Edinburgh or Glasgow. This was the view from below Calton Hill, and I would have to walk up to the top. I was glad I hiked to Arthur's Seat the day before when the weather was better. This misty and cloudy weather was so depressing for hiking. After just a few minutes, I had already reached the top. There wasn't really much to see, but anyway, I took a gander at a few different architectural structures here and there. I also stole a wide view of Edinburgh city, but it didn't look as nice as the view from Arthur's Seat. When I was leaving, I saw two cute dogs playing happily with each other on the grass. I guess animals love open spaces like humans do. My next checkpoint was a gallery, before which I went past something that looked like a shopping mall but didn't enter. I also saw the Balmoral Hotel, as well as the Iron Duke, or the Duke of Wellington. Besides, I observed overground electric cables and realized that some trains ran on the road in the city. The St. Andrew's Square garden grabbed my attention too. There was the Melville Monument surrounded by festive decorations, and I guess the vibe there would be livelier at night. I did a bit more of my street photography thing, pretending I was an artistic person, before finally arriving at the Scottish National Portrait Gallery. This was the view inside after I walked past the entrance. I gradually progressed to the first floor, seeing two face sculptures in the staircase. The first floor exhibited the portraits of many people who have contributed greatly to the life or international status of Scotland. These celebrated people were from all walks of life. There were writers, poets, newscasters, broadcast journalists, politicians, soldiers, actors or actresses, lecturers, pharmacologists, chemists, forensic anthropologists, oncologists, pilots, musical composers, etc. You name it, the list goes on and on. I didn't forget to look at the art on the ceilings and walls, as well as the small sculptures next to the windows. There was also an exhibition called The World's Edge, showing the works of Thomas Joshua Cooper, who mapped many geographically extreme places in the world. That meant something like the northmost part of some continent, or the eastmost part of some country, etc. The artworks were pretty elegant and impressive. Then I moved on to the second floor, where the art or portraits told much more about history and culture, especially Jacobitism, an important topic in Scottish history. In short, Jacobites were those who supported the exiled Catholic monarch of Scotland, England and Ireland. This painting shows how Scottish General Sir Ralph Abercrombie led the British troops to land at Abu Qir, Egypt in 1801, fighting past the French forces led by Napoleon Bonaparte. The Battle of Alexandria, a major battle between Britain and France during the French Revolutionary Wars, soon followed. Sir Ralph Abercrombie's thigh was injured and bandaged in this painting, although he did successfully lead his troops to win the war. Regarding the roles of females when men were engaged in war, the portraits of suffragettes and female anti-war poets were exhibited, for example. With the suffragettes' contributions, men and women have had equal voting rights since 1928. If you're also interested in other famous people, such as Sir Walter Scott, Queen Victoria, and Sir Winston Churchill, you'll get all the information you need in this gallery as well. My final stop was the Royal Botanic Gardens, which was quite far away. Later, when I finished visiting the gardens, I would have to walk back to the hostel to take back my second backpack, before proceeding to the train station to leave Edinburgh. Time was pretty tight, so I only had a few moments to visit different parts of the gardens and wasn't able to see much. Moreover, perhaps since it was winter, the gardens were not very impressive. I guess the visit would be more enjoyable if it was summer or if there were more time to explore. Anyway, it was nice to walk around a bit and get some fresh air. I returned to the hostel, took all my belongings, caught my very last glimpses of Edinburgh, and then went to Edinburgh Waverley train station to catch my train back to Oxford. That pretty much concludes my 5-day, 4-night Scottish trip. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching. Once again, a belated Merry Christmas, and I wish you all a happy, healthy New Year 2022.